Everybody's time. Um, Thank you, Tricia. I was just about to ask. All right, so welcome everyone to the August meeting of Central Park United Neighbors. Um, I will just start with the opening blurb for any newcomers about Central Park United Neighbors. CPUN is the Registered Neighborhood Organization, or RNO, for the Central Park community. We provide a working forum for the residents of Central Park to participate in creating, developing, and fostering a vibrant urban community dedicated to social equity, environmental responsibility, and economic opportunity. At our monthly meetings, we facilitate the discussion of key issues with neighbors, engage in proactive problem prevention and amicable problem solving. CPUN is committed to providing an inclusive and welcoming environment for all members of our community. Our mission is the betterment of the city of Denver by providing a forum for the residents living in Central Park to discuss and resolve issues, a network of communication, and a means of acting on matters of importance to the community as a whole. We promote public service, civil civic discourse, collective efficacy, and we're an all-volunteer board of Central Park residents, and we are a registered 501c3. My name is Liz Stolniker. I am the board president for CPUN. The agenda for tonight, I'll do a quick overview and then just jump right into our speakers. Following this intro, we will have our guest speakers are kind of all speaking to the issue of community safety. Our first guest speakers for the first half hour will be Lieutenant Kevin Hines and Technician Danae Ferens with DPD District 5 to talk about Central Park crime stats and law enforcement's response and interventions. Then following that, we'll have a conversation, presentation and Q&A with Dr. Robert Davis and Dr. Lisa Calderon from the Denver Task Force to Reimagine Policing and Public Safety to talk about community-based safety and interventions. Following that, we'll have our community partner updates. I have District 8 and the MCA on deck. And then after that, we'll do our committee updates. And then our board work from 8:05 to 8:30 will be the treasurer's report and kind of the long list of budget request votes for tonight. And then we'll have a quick look ahead at the end of the meeting for our next two meetings, and we'll wrap up. And so without further ado, I will let Lieutenant Hines and Technician Ferens take it away. And I'll stop sharing so that you can share your slide deck.
All right. Well, good evening. Thank you, Liz. Give me just a moment to see if I can make this share properly. That always seems to be the technological challenge. Give me just a moment here. Let's see if I can go in here to our slides. I'm going to jump around a little bit in my slide deck here, but again, thank you for having us tonight. I am, for anybody who hasn't seen me on a meeting before or met me elsewhere, I am Kevin Hines, and I am the Sector 1 Lieutenant for Denver Police District 5. I'm the day shift commander for District 5. And when I start talking about sectors, I'll kind of refer you to the screen in front of you right there. Precincts 511 and 512 comprise all of the Central Park neighborhood that is located within Denver. And I stress that because I know part of the Central Park neighborhood flows into Aurora. We don't have jurisdiction over that area. We cover the Central Park neighborhood in Denver. Now, District 5 itself continues east from Central Park and includes Montbello, the Tower Road Corridor, Gateway, Green Valley Ranch, those neighborhoods as well. But specifically looking at Sector 1, Precinct 511 is the Central Park neighborhood area north of Interstate 70, and Precinct 512 includes the remainder of the Central Park neighborhood south of I-70. So give you a little bit of an idea while we're on this slide, our command structure at the District 5 station. Commander Penn is the commander of the entire district. He's responsible for the whole district and everything that goes on there. Lieutenant Sean Ferris handles administrative tasks and our is responsible for our detectives and those units. Again, I handle Sector 1 and I'm our day shift commander. Lieutenant Scott Armstrong's responsible for Sector 2 and our evening shift, and Lieutenant Mike Cody has our overnight shift in District 5. I also have contact information up here for our community resource team, which includes Technician Kat McCandless, Technician Danae Ferenz, Officer Monique Cabrera, and Megan Patrick, who many of you have met by now as well. I'm going to jump back to our other slide here and start talking a little bit about crime stats in the area. So when we look at Sector 1, I want to emphasize first that over 90% of the crime on kind of a rolling basis in any year tends to be nonviolent crime. This sector of the city is overwhelmingly characterized by nonviolent crime. Now, this isn't to suggest that these crimes aren't important or that we're not trying to solve them or that they're not a major influence on people's lives, but just to give some context to that, for the last 28 days, only 9.9% of crime in Precinct 511 has been violent crime and 9.3% of crime in 512. So again, tracking around that 90% as nonviolent crime. With that said, we do have some areas of concern I want to discuss. And it's tracking pretty evenly for both precincts, both in Precinct 511 and 512. The top crimes in order are larceny, theft from motor vehicle, auto theft, and I think it's important to kind of dive into these a little bit to understand both the extent of the crime and then the nature of the crime itself. So first, looking at larceny, our top crime in this sector. In Precinct 511, larceny is currently up 52% over the last 28 days and almost 103% for the year. When we look at Precinct 512, it's up about 47% in the last 28 days and 23.4% year to date. I'm going to dive into the reasons for that in just a moment, but I'll give you context to the other numbers here first. As far as theft from motor vehicles concerned, over the last 28 days, we're up 110% in Precinct 511. However, that follows a month when we had pretty low numbers. And I am happy to say we are down 21% over last year on theft from motor vehicle cases. Similarly, in Precinct 512, we're up over 68% in the last 28 days, but we're also down 46.3% year to date. So we're hoping we don't see that. We see that spike more as an anomaly than the norm. We've made progress on that over last year. As many of you may remember, last year, auto theft was a really big issue for us in Sector 1. And over the last 28 days in Precinct 511, again, this is area north of I-70, we're down 5.6% and we're down almost 33% for the year. In Precinct 512, we're up 6.3% for the last 28 days, but we are down 44.1% for the year. So auto-related crimes were trending in the right direction for the year, with some spikes here and there. But as I mentioned, the big noteworthy one we've seen this year is larcenies. As many of you probably already recognize, the Central Park neighborhood is characterized by having a lot of retail establishments, and two retail areas in particular tend to drive our larceny rates. And I'll step back for just a moment and kind of define larceny. For lack of a better term, it's almost like theft, etc., or theft other. It includes things that wouldn't otherwise be categorized as, say, auto theft, theft from motor vehicle, burglaries, robberies, things of that nature all have their own categorization. Larceny is kind of your other thefts. And the main things driving larceny in Sector 1 is retail shoplifting. And currently, the top four businesses that have been victimized the most in the past 28 days have 44% of all shoplifts in District 5. When you consider how many businesses we have just here in Sector 1, let alone the whole district, for four of those businesses to be receiving 44% of all of our shoplifts is huge. And it just tells you how much effect some criminals can have on these businesses when they start to target them for crimes. With that said, larceny, shoplifts aren't the only thing I want to talk about tonight, but I do want to mention those in a little more depth, just because that is kind of our leading cause of larcenies. Um, in the Northfield Mall area, we've put a lot of emphasis on there. We've worked with the mall's management. We've also worked with our anti-crime unit and our Colorado Metro Auto Theft Task Force to put a lot of pressure on that area. And I think we've had some effect in the last several months. Our anti-crime team just ran an operation up at the Target store in Northfield the other day, and in the course of a couple of hours made 7 arrests out of that store. Our officers were trying to target a pattern group of criminals that has been hitting Target stores throughout the metro area. They didn't find those individuals on this particular operation, but they did still manage 7 arrests in a couple of hours. Some of the other stores that are commonly hit, such as Walmart and Home Depot over in the Quebec Square area, have hired off-duty Denver police officers to work in the stores. And we've had great effect out there in reducing the number of crimes they've seen, the amount of loss they're experiencing. Walmart in particular has been very effective with this. In the past 28 days, we've had a 100% arrest rate for shoplifters that they've identified in that location, which means that we don't have a lot of the reports coming in where we don't have suspect info or our detectives are trying to track down the suspects. These are cases where we've actually been able to catch the suspects in progress and get them in custody. Overall, looking at shoplifts in the past 28 days, we've arrested in 49% of the cases. So I think that's actually a pretty good improvement over what we've seen in the past. Almost half of all shoplifting cases have resulted in arrest, so a case clearance. Some of the ways we've been dealing with these situations is that we've been transitioning to doing more custodial arrests in situations where we're dealing with repeat offenders, pattern behavior, or businesses that are at the top of our list for victimization. And what I mean by custodial arrest is that rather than writing the person a citation and letting them go and having them walk into the next business and commit a shoplifting crime there, we're actually taking that person into custody, bringing them downtown for booking, making sure we get their fingerprints and their picture on file and all of that stuff, rather than just sending them on their way. Because we find that when we've issued tickets, a lot of these folks just continue to offend in the area. Another thing that we've done is work with the DA's office and the courts to try to request area restrictions against individuals who are chronic offenders. At previous meetings, I've mentioned some individuals by their monikers, such as the Trash Bag Bandit. That particular individual was responsible for about $40,000 worth of thefts that we were able to prove just in the Northfield area. So with individuals like that, we're working with the courts to get area restrictions put in place so that they're basically in violation of a court order if they return to that location. That gives us a few more tools to use to try to keep these individuals from victimizing our businesses and our neighbors. And we've had some effect with that on this problem. We've also started to roll out flock cameras in Denver. These are basically networked cameras that have license plate reader capability. Denver owns a few of these cameras that we have in public right-of-ways and things of that nature, but we're also talking with some of our major retail partners and major housing areas to make sure that they have the opportunity to install those cameras if they choose to do so, which gives us some more investigative tools as we're trying to target the people responsible for these larcenies. Now, when I mentioned that shoplift is the biggest issue, I also want to mention a couple of other emerging trends we're seeing in larceny. One of these has popped up just recently here in Sector 1, and that is theft of copper from cell phone tower sites. As we've transitioned to more of I guess a heavy data use in cell phones. There's more towers than they used to be in closer areas. And we've been hit 7 times just this month with individuals targeting cell phone sites to steal copper. For starters, that's dangerous. It's also expensive for the cell phone carriers, and it can cause outages to critical communications equipment. So we really want to see that stopped. The area where we've been seeing these crimes predominantly is in between Havana Street and Peoria Street in Precinct 511. We have not identified a suspect in these cases yet, although we do believe it's probably the same individual. We do have a picture of an individual that was taken by a citizen in one of these cases. And I will say that these are thefts that are happening in a pattern area, but kind of randomly in terms of time, anywhere between midnight and early morning hours is when we believe most of them are taking place. They're not targeting one carrier. They've had thefts occur at T-Mobile sites, Verizon sites, and AT&T sites. But if you happen to see somebody who looks like they don't belong, taking apart a radio repeater, a cell phone tower, or anything like that, and you can safely do so, please try to get a picture of them. If you can't safely do so, I don't want you to put yourself in jeopardy to do so, but give us a call 911, let us get out there and try to catch this person. We don't want to see cell phone outages, and we certainly don't want to see this kind of loss occurring. The other recent pattern that's been occurring with larcenies are bicycle thefts. These have been concentrated, well, they've been spread throughout the district, but there's one concentration we've seen near the area of 29th and Roslyn. Ironically enough, we just last month had a bike to work day event out at 29th and Roslyn where we were offering to register as people's bicycles. And that's an area where we're currently seeing a lot of bike thefts. We have been doing some undercover operations out there trying to catch the individuals responsible for stealing these bikes, but just be aware that this is a trend that's occurring. Many of you, myself included, like to get out on our bikes, and the last thing you want to do is have a nice bike stolen. A few recommendations there. If you haven't registered your bike with 529 Garage, please reach out to us at the station. We can help you do so. It's a nationwide database, and it's really kind of a cool feature, because if your bike is stolen and it's later found by somebody who has the app, even if they're not a police officer, they can scan the shield on your bike and tell if your bike's stolen. And if your bike's stolen, they can call local law enforcement and report it. They normally charge for those stickers. We have some of them available for free at our station, so we'd love to get you hooked up with that if we could. Another recommendation I have, if you're parking your bike in a public area, use a strong lock, but also park it in a very public area. Bike racks that are in alleys or kind of obscure locations without a lot of foot traffic tend to be hit for thefts a lot more often than bike racks that are in really heavily trafficked areas. As you might expect, criminals don't like to be seen when they're stealing stuff. So that's my advice there. As we move on to the other top crimes, as far as auto thefts are concerned, Hyundais and Kias continue to be the most popular vehicles for thieves in the area. This is particularly true with the pre-push button start Kias and Hyundais. So if you start the vehicle with a key, it's more prone to theft. Now, many of these vehicles are eligible for a software update that's available through Hyundai and Kia. If you have one of those vehicles, please reach out to your local dealership and find out if they have that software update. It makes it a bit harder for thieves to steal your vehicle. The other thing I would say is, if you don't have a steering wheel lock for your vehicle, get one. We sometimes have them available at the station. Call us and we can see if we can give you one. If not, they're not very expensive to buy, but they really do make a pretty big difference. Typically, thief is going to walk up to your car, see that, realize it's going to take a couple extra minutes to steal that car, and they're going to move on to another vehicle. So it's really a low cost but highly effective way to secure your vehicle. Again, though, we are down significantly in auto theft from last year, and hopefully we can continue with that trend. Theft from motor vehicle, though, this is basically items being stolen from in a vehicle, has been a problem for us. Few recommendations here on that end. Park in well-lit areas whenever possible, in a garage if you have it available. Most importantly, remove valuables from your vehicle. We don't want to see expensive personal items being the reason that somebody breaks out your window and gets into your car. Uh, Along those same lines, though, don't have items in your vehicle that look like they're valuable, even though they're not. I've investigated a number of cases where somebody broke somebody's car window and stole a diaper bag, and they got probably $3 worth of diapers and some Desitin and the kind of stuff that parents keep in bags for their kids. But in the process of doing so, they caused a $500 loss for the victim of that theft when they broke out their window that had to be repaired. So kind of keep in mind, when you're walking away from your car, look in there and see if anything looks like it might be something that would entice a thief to break your window. And if so, consider concealing it in the vehicle or removing it from the vehicle. And this should go without saying, but every year we have about around 100 guns stolen from vehicles that are parked here in District 5. Vehicles make terrible gun safes. Please do not keep guns in your vehicles. I can't emphasize that enough. One other thing I would say is if you're parking outside, it's a good idea not to leave a garage door opener on your driver's side visor like so many of us do. Thieves have repeatedly broken into vehicles, pushed the button on the garage door opener, gone up to your garage, walked in, taken stuff from your garage, and then come out and taken your car as well. So if you're parking outside of your home at night, good idea to have that garage door opener out of your vehicle. If that's too inconvenient, at least put it in a center console or somewhere that's a little less obvious. But just some food for thought on that. I don't want to run too
Just real
long on
quick.
time. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Did somebody say something?
Yeah, I emailed you a couple of things, and I was just hoping that you would have a chance to get to those before 7 when we have to turn the time off.
Yeah, I'm heading into those now, Amanda. So, so a few questions we've had recently, and Amanda had asked about these that some of you have been asking. First, I'm going to start with, in no particular order here, we're going to go through the Quebec corridor. A lot of concerns have been raised since the all-in Mile High site, House 1000 site at 4040 Quebec was opened. And as I've mentioned previously, that was a cause for a lot of calls for service for us throughout the year. Year to date, we've had 379 calls for service at that location, which is a huge increase over the previous year. However, over the past month and over the past few months, we have seen a decline in these calls compared to what we were seeing at the beginning of the year. Last month, we've had an 8.5% decrease in calls for service within a radius of 600 feet of that facility, and we've had a 6.8% decrease within 1,000 feet of that facility. Management has been doing some staffing changes there. They've been working with our team to try to install better signage to indicate when people are trespassing at the location. And they've been working with our HOT team, our homeless outreach team, to try to reduce the impact of unlawful camping on their property and surrounding their property. Quebec Square is obviously fairly adjacent to this facility. As I mentioned, that's a larceny hotspot, and we have had some luck by putting more officers in that area to deal with the issues. So we're having some success out there. There's still some work to do. It is still an area that's requiring more resources than it did in the past, but we also have a lot of people that were recently experiencing homelessness throughout the city who are now off the street and getting resources. So although we may have more impact at that location, many of those individuals we were dealing with spread out throughout the district previously. So I think we're making some good strides there, and that's kind of my update on Quebec. Another question we had was regarding fireworks around the 4th of July. I looked into our calls for service, and we received around a dozen calls for fireworks in the 24-hour period of 4th of July here in Sector 1. So not as many calls as I would have expected we had received during that time. As a result of those calls, we had 2 cases where individuals were actually found and contacted by the police. One call was determined to be unfounded. One caller later requested no police contact. Presumably the situation resolved itself before we got there. And we had one incident I found where a fire was reported, and the call notes from that indicated that it was extinguished. It's unclear if Denver Fire ended up with an active arson investigation on that case, or if they weren't able to prove anything. Just to clarify jurisdictional boundaries here, Denver Fire is responsible for arson investigations, not Denver Police Department. We don't have the jurisdiction on arson cases.
I actually, sorry, this is Liz. Could you also provide a contact at the fire department then for us to follow up with, just to kind of learn more about the work they did on their end for that fire?
Yeah, I don't know offhand who we would talk to in Denver Fire. I'll see if I can find somebody, but the contact I had is no longer there. I'm not sure exactly who handles that over there, but we can reach out to them and email you back on that one. So, but from our side of it, we can't see what they did on that case, if anything. So I'll see if we can get you in touch with somebody over there.
Thank you.
Additionally, on the fireworks, 2 additional incidents were addressed directly by officers who witnessed the fireworks. So those were cases where no 911 call was received, but our officers were able to get out there and take proactive action to deal with that. Another question that came up when I was talking with some of you from the CPUN board the other day was regarding a chase that entered District 5 the other day. This chase was originated in Adams County, and it was a vehicle pursuit in relation to a shooting case. So Adams County chased that vehicle into District 5, primarily stayed on the edge of our district, some of the roads that actually share jurisdictional boundaries. We received a mutual aid request in response to that incident, where basically their dispatch notified our dispatch that a chase was coming into our jurisdiction and asked for assistance. Within 6 minutes of entering Denver, that pursuit had left Denver. The involved vehicle ultimately crashed in Aurora, and several people were taken into custody at that time. It appears at least one of the parties that was taken into custody was wounded in a prior incident, but none of this actually appeared to have a nexus to Denver itself. It just happened to pass through Denver on the way from one jurisdiction to another. One question that kind of came up was how our chase policies work and what our mutual aid agreements are like. So just to give you an idea on this, mutual aid is available between all the agencies. If we have a major incident, God forbid, an active shooter or something of that nature, we will call for aid from other jurisdictions. They will call for aid from us. We're set up to respond quickly in those kind of events. We also have network channels available on our radio systems now that we've had in place for 10 or 15 years, where we can switch over to a common channel where all of us can communicate. So Aurora can talk to Denver, we can talk to Adams County, whatever we need to make these calls safer and more efficiently resolved. In terms of chase policies in Denver, we are pretty cautious about what we will chase in terms of a vehicle pursuit. There's a lot of risk to citizens. We're a highly populated city. There's a lot of traffic. Typically, we're only going to engage in a vehicle pursuit if we're dealing with a violent felony against a person, something where the risk to residents is higher if we don't pursue the person than if we do pursue them. So that kind of covers the chase issue. I'm going to move quickly here because I know we have some more stuff to cover. We unfortunately had a recent double homicide here in District 5 that involved the domestic violence situation. And I know many of you have shared concerns about domestic violence and how we can deal with those cases. These are tough calls, and it's something we struggle with as an agency as well, because so much of this happens behind closed doors. And sometimes it's happening to your neighbor or a friend, and you may not even be aware of it. This is something I always say, because I've talked to many witnesses who have said they hesitated to call us because they didn't want to get involved. But if you hear something or see something, please call 911. If it sounds like your neighbor is getting assaulted in their apartment or their house, or you're not sure if that's happening, call 911. We can go out there, knock on the door. Maybe it's just a verbal argument. We knock on the door and they open the door and they go, okay, maybe we need to calm down, and they have a better night. But there's been many times when that's happened and our officers have shown up and found out that somebody was getting assaulted. And we certainly want to break that cycle of violence before somebody gets seriously injured. Another thing I want to do is mention that there are resources available. If you or someone you know are being victimized through domestic violence, the Rose Andom Center here in Denver is a great resource. I can put their phone number in the chat in a minute, but they advertise themselves as a place for domestic violence victims to find the safety, support, and services needed to rebuild their lives and heal their families. They also have resources and information available about where victims can find shelter locations to get out of a bad living situation. Although the Rose Andom Center isn't available 24/7, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is. I'll put their number in the chat in a moment as well. 24/7 services. They always have English and Spanish speakers available, and they cover 200 plus languages through interpreters. If somebody is not English speaking, they can get them to somebody that can help them handle that and hopefully save them from a dangerous situation. The final thing I wanted to discuss here real quick was there's been a lot of questions about the low-level stop policy here in Denver. You may have seen in the news, Chief Thomas announced that we've made some changes to how we're looking at low-level stops for traffic violations. And I first want to define low-level stops. These are usually non-safety related things that include like expired registration, driving without fully functioning headlights or taillights, a crack in the windshield that's of a minor nature, or an air freshener or something hanging from the rear view mirror. Although those are still infractions that are in violation of the law, the way we're looking at it as an agency now is that we're not going to stop those violations just on the basis of those violations. Almost thinking those as almost a secondary violation these days. What we're going to do is tell our officers to essentially look for better traffic stops, or if they need to stop a vehicle for one of those, it's in furtherance of another investigation. Maybe the vehicle matches a description from a recent auto theft, or it's in an area where we're having some crimes take place and they're circling the area and things like that. But that's kind of the nuts and bolts of that policy, is we're just trying to focus our efforts on more serious crimes in the area. I'm happy to take some questions here if we have some time for it. One thing I wanted to do is flip over to a slide here, and I'm sorry, I forgot to get onto 512 here as I was talking, but I wanted to get onto this slide here to show some of the upcoming events we have. Technician Ferens, did you have anything you wanted to add about those events we have coming up here in District 5?
I did. Just real quick, thank you everybody for having us this evening. So this Saturday is our annual Safety Expo. That's a really big one. We do that every year at the Northfield Shopping Center along Main Street. We will be there from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's a family-friendly event. We're going to have a lot of stores from the mall come out with tables and different giveaways. We will be there. A lot of different vendors will have a kid zone area with a jumping castle and a bubble machine. So it'll be a lot of fun. So if you're looking for something to do this weekend, head over to the Northfield Mall from anytime between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. and we will be out there. On the 27th is the mayor's safety meeting. We will be attending that as well. That's 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the school located at 10825 East 47th Avenue. And then on the 31st of August, the Tequila Blues bar at 4611 North Peoria Street is doing a family event called the Taste of Labor and Blues. That will be from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. We will be there as well. And then on September 14th, Lincoln Tech is going to do their annual car show. That's a really big event. Again, if you're looking for something to do, that will be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Lincoln Tech as well on the 14th of September. And that is it.
And I know we're probably running short on time, and I apologize for that. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as best we can here. if there's time for that, Liz.
Yeah, just maybe one or two questions and then we'll move to the next part of the agenda. But there was a question in the chat on the incidence or prevalence of gas tanks in cars being drilled.
So I know we had a couple of those incidents earlier in the year. It's not a statistic I'd tell you right offhand how many we're having right now. I haven't heard of a big trend of them lately. There were more of them back, I'll say, first quarter of the year. We did have some incidents where that was happening, particularly on larger vehicles. I've seen that on like box trucks and things of that nature. I haven't heard of a pattern of them occurring right now, but something we are always keeping an eye on when we start seeing those patterns pop up. And as you might expect, as fuel prices fluctuate, that's something that tends to go on the rise as fuel prices go up as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or last questions, or if it requires more of a follow-up? Okay, there's a question about drag racing in the chat.
Let me see if I can see the chat.
Can you talk more about the drag racing and huge collection of cars that meet off over 56th weekly? There is minimal police presence and wondering what can be done. And I know
Yeah, so this is actually a metro-wide problem. I mean, we're talking all the way from Fort Collins to Pueblo, out to Lyman, up into the mountains, even up on Mount Blue Sky. They've had some issues recently. Essentially, the meat and potatoes of what is happening is that these groups are organizing themselves via social media. So in the past, there used to be a few places where people were known to gather for drag racing, illegal street racing. These days, what they can do is get on an app with each other and say, hey, we're going to meet at the warehouses up off of 56 in Central Park, get up there. And, 300, 500 people might show up in the matter of a few minutes. And when they start to feel a police presence, they'll send out a message to their chat and say, okay, we're going to head over to District 3 down to the Micro Center, or we're going to head out to Aurora. And they tend to bounce around the metro area. Consequently, to try to address this issue, we formed a metro-wide interjurisdictional working group to address street racing. That group meets on a monthly basis, particularly during the warmer weather months. We don't see as much of this when snow's on the ground, but it does still happen in winter. But the biggest time is warm weather months, particularly Sunday nights. And this group works together so we can share that information quickly. We also have some of our undercover resources that have infiltrated a number of these groups to try to get information to our officers faster than the groups can get out there. So in effect, if we hear that a group is heading towards the warehouses here in Sector 1, we'll try to get our officers there before those individuals show up. What we found is if we have a presence on site when they get there, they'll tend to wave off and go somewhere else. It's a lot harder once we have 500 or 1,000 people congregating to get them out of there. So sometimes it's call load dependent. We are running operations every weekend where we have officers specifically assigned to address the street racing issue. It's a huge concern. It's a major safety issue. If you happen to see cars gathering where it looks like they may be getting ready to street race, either call it into Denver Police or go to reportstreetracing.com and we will address that accordingly. But please keep us informed on that as best you can, and we'll keep working on the issue.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Hines. I think there were a couple of questions about the motel shelters. And so actually I can follow up with the information you provided in your presentation in our community email so for folks. And then also if you wanted to share the slide deck, or we can just let folks know that that we do the chapters in the YouTube video of the recording. And so folks can also just, focus on your presentation if they wanted that information, but we can provide some of the 911 calls. We actually have the Good Neighbor Committee meeting tomorrow. So we'll be following up with some information. I know that that's the 911 calls, and the emails from the community are on the agenda for that. So I'll also be adding some information.
Yeah, sounds good. And I'm happy to share the slide deck with you. I can email it to you here in just a little bit.
Yeah, and Amanda, I can include the other Quebec corridor shelters that are in Police District 2, and not just 5 also. All right. Well, thank you, Lieutenant Hines.
Thank you so much for having us tonight.
All right, thank you. And we'll move to our next guest speaker. I got a note that Dr. Davis is actually not able to join us tonight. So Dr. Lisa Calderon is joining us to speak on behalf of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing and Public Safety. Dr. Calderon, do you have a slide deck to share?
I do, and I'll go ahead and put that up because it'll be an interesting contrast to what we just heard. For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Lisa Calderon, and I am wearing 2 hats this evening. One as representing the Denver Task Force to Reimagine Policing and Public Safety. And the other is as the director for our policy and reentry initiatives for the Center for Trauma and Resilience, which is another resource for you all. And I'll get into that in just a minute. I'm told I have an abbreviated time now, so I will try to get everything in very quickly. But I'm also a criminal justice professor, and I can say that in all of the years that I've heard criminal justice stats, I don't know them to help people feel safer when we don't have a strategy for what do we do with this information. And so my conversation or presentation to you all tonight is about, so then what do we do? We have all of this information about crime. And so how do we build a safer communities? And let me get this one up. Let's see here. Let's see, I'm trying to move away from this box here. Here we go. Okay, and let me see if this will just work on slide control. Probably not. Hit present and see if that will help. Okay, hopefully you can see the full screen there. So Transforming Our Communities Alliance actually is an initiative that came after from Reimagining Policing and Public Safety. And so we are a community-led initiative. Like I said, of the task force, we aim to enhance community engagement and collaboration to increase neighborhood safety and violence prevention. And toca is derived from the Spanish word of touch. So our purpose is to do outreach and touch folks in terms of their lives and also how we can build community together and build power together. What we do is we are a community collaborative fostering partnerships among neighborhood organizations, service providers, policy advocates, researchers, organizers, and violence interrupters. Our approach emphasizes a community-centered, non-law enforcement strategy to address public safety challenges. Our goals are research-based. They are to create and identify community-centered alternatives to policing, transition our city response from an over-reliance on law enforcement to restorative and healing practices, support communities in creating their own unique public safety solutions. And so we start with this definition of what is public safety. Now, the Reimagining Policing and Public Safety came out of the George Floyd murder and protests that ensued. And so we really had to rethink how we talk and think about safety. So the task force is comprised of over 40 organizations, and we developed 112 recommendations And we are now on our second administration trying to get those implemented. But part of that community conversation was to define, what do we mean by public safety? And so our definition is public safety ensures that all community members decide how to organize their social environments. Public safety provides the freedom to live and thrive with the protection and support of social, physical, mental, and economic well-being. Public safety prevents, reduces, and heals harm. And public safety is not a function of armed forces with a proven track record of racism and violence historically. So that is our working definition for our task force of public safety. Our theory of change is we have always been the first responders in our communities. We know how to keep ourselves safe. And every culture, community has some history of collective self-efficacy, where we co-develop resources, strategies, because most crime is actually not reported. If I heard the officer correctly, and most of those crimes were nonviolent. So if we have most crimes nonviolent and we have most crimes not reported, and many of those crimes are in the home without people ever hearing or talking about them, and I'll talk about domestic violence in a little bit, then what do we do? So through collaboration and empowering approaches, we can foster community resilience without relying on law enforcement. Working across neighborhoods, we can tailor solutions, connect resources, and provide training to build stronger communities. So this is a picture of Dr. Davis, who's heading our initiative, and we are focused on community-based violence interventions, or CVI, proven to reduce crime. And community violence intervention, or CVI, has proven to be a humane, evidence-based alternative to over-policing and mass incarceration. There's a really great article, the push to create an Office of Neighborhood Safety and to empower our community, put power in the hands of community, came out in November by Mo Clark. So I'd encourage folks to check that out. All right, so from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, this is a CVI checklist. So one is having trusted, credible messengers from the affected community to deliver key intervention elements. Two, the messengers as full partners who provide input and guidance on the intervention's approach. Three, a focus on those at highest risk of experiencing or perpetrating community violence. Four, data from multiple sources that are vetted for racial, ethnic, economic, and other biases. Five, practices that address trauma on individuals and the broader population in historically underinvested communities. Six, public, private, and community members most impacted by violence, building authentic relationships to prevent violence, strengthen community resilience, and build social capital. And seven, racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic equity, including understanding the many goals, many social, demographic, economic, and institutional factors that perpetuate community violence, and bringing supportive responses directly to the neighborhoods and people with the greatest need. So we don't use language that dehumanizes anybody. Reducing people to criminals, offenders, perpetrators doesn't give us the reasons behind why people are committing crimes. And what are some of those root causes that we can address as to the source of committing crime, so that we can truly have safer communities. So healing models from across the nation that we have looked at that incorporates or are known as CVIs. So violence interrupters or street outreach teams. This is a public health approach to violence intervention. These are trusted interventionists with lived experience from the community who build relationships. They support survivors in crisis. They bring together those who have been perpetrated and been victimized. They offer restorative process and provide immediate response and long-term support. So GRASP, the Gang Rescue and Support Project, is one great example here in Denver. and they are also part of this coalition. Hospital-based violence intervention programs. They engage victims of violence. They prevent retaliation in the immediate aftermath of a traumatic injury. They are typically located in emergency departments. They provide providers partner with patients and families immediately after and for months that follow. So you'll see a pattern in these models that it isn't just responding to the critical incident, but it's also the follow-up afterward to reduce, prevent, and intervene in any follow-up violent crime activities. Community-driven crime prevention through environmental design, using architecture and urban planning to create or restore public spaces, create community gathering spaces, restoration of vacant lots, investing in the physical environment. When communities look safe, people feel safe. And so, this is Dolores Alfaro, who is standing in her backyard garden and has worked with Grow House, and some of you have heard of that. So an example of environmental design and proven benefits from healing models. So this is where my other hat comes in with the Center for Trauma and Resilience. We come together in a common purpose, create a sense of community and strong bond, includes cultural events, art and music festivals, placemaking activities within neighborhoods, and involves all genders, ages, and ethnicities. So I'm going to give you all just a quick example of this. And let's see here. I'm going to switch screens. All right, let's see here. All right. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. And if for some reason you can't see or hear this, please let me know. All right.
The Center for Trauma and Resilience is all about serving the community that has been impacted by crime and trauma.
We're a trauma serving agency, and typically those services are provided traditionally talk therapy. So that's why we include physical, emotional, spiritual health, because we know that all of those areas get impacted by trauma. We don't know many organizations that exist the way we exist. We are no cost service. There's no cost to clients, their families, their friends. We have a translation and interpreting center, so we can provide services in a variety of languages. We offer trauma-sensitive yoga, auricular acupuncture, and our philosophy is to screen in versus screening out. What can we help you with, Ms. Smith? Would you like to come in and chat? That starts the conversation.
One of the misconceptions is that when somebody has been impacted by trauma, they're broken forever and there's no healing. After they've engaged with us and they've processed, yes, this happened to me, but this doesn't define who I am and who I will be.
And we try to educate people on what it looks like and what it feels like. That part of the psychoeducational process gives them some relief. They're like, oh, this is normal, that I wake up, that I avoid that street. And we're not saying that it's perfect. This event stays with you, it's integrated, but people feel like they can go on, that there's a future. We have a thing that we buy what we sell. We hire bilingual and bicultural staff.
we want to make sure that the community that we're serving is represented and is heard.
Part of the job description is staff have a self-care plan, because this work, though we love it, we're passionate about it, it does take a toll.
We value self-care so much that when we see our staff kind of like the energy dipping a little bit, we're like, okay, let's go. Let's move that table. Let's do some Zumba. Because we know if we take care of our staff is going to take great care of our clients.
I am personally inspired by seeing people heal, to see when people say to us, God, I feel so much better after being here. I didn't think I would be in this place 6 months ago. And so the resilience part emphasized the future, the light, the wholeness. And when people leave here, that's how they feel. They're back. They're back.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing and then just pause a minute to reflect that, you know, the men of color that you saw in that clip meet every Saturday and have a men's group. And some of these men, and it's several men, have come through trauma, have come through past incarceration, have come through tragedy by having family members killed by gangs, and know that we have to have alternatives to preventing violence in our communities, rather than overly relying on calling law enforcement. And how I got involved in this work is years ago, my son was assaulted by Denver police. And so on the one hand, he had to look out for gangs, and on the other hand, he had to look out for police harassment. And what we wanted to do is to make sure that everybody felt safe in their community, safe from any form of violence, bullying, etc. And so we started to ask our neighbors, what does it take to feel safe in your neighborhood? And so this has been a very long journey for me personally, but a very long journey for our communities as well. I know that I'm short on time, and this tends to happen where we spend a lot more time talking about crime and criminals and not enough about what heals us in our communities. And one of the research-based things that we know that heals communities is community efficacy. It's what you all are doing by coming together and talking about these issues, but then going a step further about then what are those solutions? What is within our power to do? And what are some options for doing that? So I'm going to just share my screen one more time as I finish my presentation and then close out sharing with you all. All right, so that's community culture. And then we have social cohesion. Now, this photo is actually one of our meetings at Shorter AME Church, in which we called our community together to talk about what would alternatives to policing look like. So this model is known as social cohesion. We enhance positive social relations between residents. We have a specific focus on solving local problems. We create action plans to tackle difficult problems. Social problems are proximal, meaning they are targeted directly within the local neighborhood, not across the whole city, so that they're really tailored for what each neighborhood needs. And then the city benefits, detask law enforcement from unnecessary calls. This is something we've had conversations with Chief Thomas. And, you know, we don't need a badge and a gun to show up at every call. Like I said, most calls are not reported, first of all, but people want the harm to stop, right? And how we do that is open to all kinds of possibilities. Allow law enforcement to focus on crime. It reduces overall crime rates. It strengthens community relationships and eliminates bureaucratic barriers. Sorry, you got a little typo on bureaucratic. We'll fix that. And then it's community-led. So community-led is that we have these trusted community leaders, and they go back with the resources that they need to implement a lot of these changes. When it's city run, we often have to go through a city bureaucracy and then an organizational bureaucracy, and then they pick and choose limited partners to work with. In community-led initiatives, it's all about community and who community decides are their leaders. So for too long, we have leaned too heavily on policing as the only solution. We know there's a better way, one that builds on what we have learned about violence and its causes. And this is from Amy Solomon, Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs. So our work is built on 3 pillars: healing and empowerment, community intervention, community power building. Our healing and empowerment focuses on individuals and families, so providing those resources, particularly from historically marginalized communities that are disproportionately affected by the carceral system, by addressing trauma and mental health challenges, strengthening families and community relationships, and providing support for victims. Also empowering reentering individuals. They are also part of our community to contribute to their neighborhood safety and violence prevention, and providing restorative services through culturally relevant, gender responsive, and healing informed resources while addressing the underlying causes of violence. Our second is community intervention. So we support organizations, businesses, and communities with trauma-informed, gender-responsive, and culturally relevant training programs and resources to prevent and heal from violence. So provide training on crisis intervention, ethical communication, and mediation services, deploy community peace builders instead of law enforcement officers, and foster collaborations among providers and organizers to streamline efforts, build capacity, and collaborate on funding opportunities. We should not be competing against each other for funding. And community power building, support communities with driving systems change and decrease the need for police presence, dismantle harmful systems, advance healing networks, and advocate for transformative policies. Provide community power building training such as Know Your Rights, grassroots advocacy, coalition building, and power mapping, and share best practices and invest in local research to promote long-term community safety and well-being. We want everybody to be safe. So our next steps are, you can join our monthly meetings. We meet virtually on the 4th Tuesday of every month. Join quarterly educational gatherings. We just had a film with the director, reimagining safety. And so, you know, it was great to see all kinds of folks there, including Chief Thomas. We will work quarterly with our community partners to host educational events, which include community-led discussions, learning more about proven methods and widening our partnerships, and share with organizations in your community. Help us expand our partnerships by sharing our work with other organizations in your neighborhood, and invite us to present just like you did tonight. So we can talk about more robust ways and holistic ways of healing and preventing harm in our communities. And our email is info@denvertaskforce.org. And that's it in my abbreviated version. And I know that we're at time for this meeting, so I'm going to just stop sharing there and see if there's any last minute questions. And David Kugler, I thank you for the virtual applause because you are also part of our Reimagining Policing Task Force and have been an invaluable member as well. So that's it.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Do folks have any questions for Dr. Calderon?
Dr. Calderon, this is Kristen Fry, board member. I just want to say thank you so much. I know there's a lot of work that goes into this and a lot of people and time and hours and effort. I appreciate all of it. And I think there's a place and time for so many different supports for our community. So I think it's amazing. One thing I was looking for, and I was listening intently, and maybe it was there, I just missed it, but are there also supports for parent guardians? Being a parent myself, I see the lessons that I taught my toddler at 3, you know, are really bearing fruit now when she's 15, and helping parents with parenting skills and reinforcing and training about money management, so they have more opportunities and you know, that sort of thing. I just curious if that's a facet of this program at all.
It's not necessarily a particular facet of this program, but what you bring up, and thank you also for the feedback, I appreciate it, is that oftentimes parental stress can result in these cases, right? And so we want the police being called or social services getting involved. And what we want to do is prevent that. If we know that there is, and I've been in my past long ago life, a single parent, if we know that there's a single parent struggling in our community, how can we help, right? How can we help reduce that parental stress? But also, we do have our helpline as well, and I will grab our information off the website here. But that you can call our helpline and you can run questions like that through us, and then we can, you know, give you some of the resources if we are not providing that service ourselves.
Okay. Maybe if there's a, you know, 5.0 or something in the future, it would just be a somehow, and I don't know if it's through this program or another provided somewhere else, but I feel like there's such a need there because it.
Yeah, Kristen, I think what we would do is look for partners to be part of this coalition so that we could say, not, you know, hey, here's an organization that's their expertise. So what we're trying not to do is supplant what's already out there. What we're trying to do is network, because so many people like yourself don't know what's out there. And so we, you know, we pushed to create the Office of Neighborhood Safety. And when we launched ours, the mayor decided to launch his. That's fine. But part of why we pushed to launch that, and it was part of our 112 recommendations, is because of questions like yours. The communities need to be connected across this city.
Yep.
And there's so much wealth. That's why we're like, we know what keeps us safe. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we need those stronger connections.
Well said. Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know if I see any raised hands or other questions, but I did just want to highlight kind of something for our group specifically out of what you said, Dr. Calderon, is that since we're a neighborhood organization and we're talking about community safety, a big part of that is actually having a community where people feel connected to each other. And I think, and then that's how you know, can have something that's community led. You need a community first. And I think that that's where we're, you know, something that we as an organization and our board and committees is how do we foster in-person connection and community connections so that we can like figure out what are our problems and what are effective solutions to them. So I appreciate that perspective. And I think you know, the conversation tonight is a good jumping off point for some kind of internal work and reflection that we'll be doing as a board at next month's meeting. So I appreciate the time and again, presentation from our both guest speakers tonight. And I know you were wearing two hats since Dr. Davis couldn't join us. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I would love to hear if you all decide to have some kind of initiative to start talking about alternatives for policing. And just really quick, I was at one of the mayor's safety meetings in Montbello, and a lot of the people who participated were elders in that community, so a wealth of information. And they said, you know, why should our community be treated differently? We have these cars that don't work, they expire tags, etc. And the police need to just crack down, and because, you know, we don't, you know, it's a source, it's an eyesore, right? And I said, you know, what I hear is that, you know, you have pride in your neighborhood and you don't want it to be ignored. And what if we actually had a fund that helped people repair their cars that were broken down, or help to pay for expired tags rather than calling the police to cite them? And every one of them agreed with that. So how we come about a problem matters, and to be given different expansive options is possible if we don't overly rely and overthink on punishment, incarceration, and ticketing. So I'd be more than happy to work with maybe a subcommittee of this group about what could some potential alternatives be. But I thank you all for the time and for staying over, and we can get this presentation to you as well for those who are interested.
Great, thank you. That would be great. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and so we'll jump into, hold on, gotta go down. We'll jump into our community partner updates. We have City Council District 8. Jesse, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, I will try to make this a quick update. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jesse Carey. I am Councilwoman Lewis's policy aide, representing the district. Couple of quick updates from the office. One of the main things that we're working on right now on the district side is looking at traffic conditions improvement projects. This is done in conjunction with Dottie. We have a regular cadence set up with Maggie Thompson, who is the chief, like the district designer for District 8 at the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. And we're getting regular updates about sort of what's coming, what's in the pipeline, the design phase, and beyond. In addition to information related to potential like bond packages and other things like that might be upcoming. I actually have a tool that I will drop into the chat after I'm finished updating that basically maps out all of those updates within the district and explains what stage of the design they're in, what kind of project they are. So some of it is signage, some of it is pedestrian improvements, and some of it is other sort of general traffic safety updates. And I can put that in the chat. Anyone can use it. It is citywide. So you can look at the rest of the district. You can look at just Central Park. But it does have information about sort of everything that's going on in the city in terms of traffic improvements. Last night, the Affordable Denver Fund ballot measure passed out of City Council on a 9-4 vote. This would basically raise sales tax in order to raise an estimated $100 million a year to complement some of the other funding options that the city has for affordable housing. This one would really take aim at eviction defense, property tax relief. There's some home buying and homeowning assistance programs in there as well, and some direct funds for additional construction across the city, with an eye to designing developments that are a little bit less sort of siloed off. So instead of a senior living facility that's solely dedicated to senior living facility, you could try to build something that has more of an integrated community feel, which we've heard a lot from our seniors in District 8 and Central Park specifically, that they like some of the senior living housing that they have, but it makes them feel very isolated because they're kind of siloed off away from everyone else. Because that does raise sales tax in the city, it is subject to the requirements of Tabor, which means that ultimate approval of that measure belongs to the voters. So just keep an eye out for that on your November ballots. Yeah, that's sort of the update on that one. The office is currently working on a relocation assistance bill. So what that is strengthening protections for tenants, specifically when a building has conditions that are uninhabitable. State law currently provides for a lot of protections on buildings that are uninhabitable for tenants. What this bill would do is just basically clarify when the city of Denver would step in and just sort of align some of the housing code provisions in line with that state law. We will be conducting stakeholder analysis on that one and stakeholder input on that one. That's going to be all of the neighborhoods in the district. And we will be announcing how we will be doing that stakeholdering for Central Park in in the upcoming weeks. We expect that bill to be introduced into committee probably in late September at this point. Finally, we do have some shelter updates. I've mentioned in previous meetings that we were working on getting third-party data assessment and collection at all of the shelter sites to increase accountability for the shelter operators, to make sure that we're not just warehousing folks, but that they're actually getting what they need to progress from the shelter and keep the mayor's promise of House 1000 as more of a pipeline and less of a sort of warehouse alive and well. Our initial round of feedback was fairly positive. There were some areas that we need to improve for those residents. Many of the residents at 4040 from our responses feel safe. They feel like the property is maintained and their health needs are being met. 92% of the respondents at 44 said that their health needs are being met, which is good to hear. But the areas to address, they're really related to increased work training and offering. So we're seeing a lot of people who, because their basic needs are now being met, they want to get back out into the workforce. They want to leave the shelter system and be able to provide for themselves. And those opportunities are just very sparse and not very coordinated. So our office will be working with the mayor's office in this new round of budget season to figure out ways that we can provide that workforce training and offering to these populations to get them sort of moving through the pipeline. Along with that, we have heard that there is a desire for more transportation offerings. Again, people in the shelters feel very isolated and they're too far from regular services that might be closer to the core of downtown, their work or their family, because some of those guests are working at the moment. And then finally, just a general increase in behavioral health services. There are health services being provided at the shelters, but they're not as robust as many of the residents would like in order to really feel centered and really feel able to tackle everything they need to in order to keep moving on. So we will have a deep dive into that data, as well as a look at the report coming up in one of the end of month newsletters. We're still working on anonymizing some of that data, but that should be coming fairly soon. And we will be conducting multiple rounds of this data analysis in order to ensure that conditions are sort of continuing to improve, which I think was also reflected in Lieutenant Hines' data about the number of calls decreasing sort of month over month at the shelter. So that's something that our office is continuing to work on. And then finally, ways to contact the office. We are having our monthly end of month town hall that rotates through the districts. This month, we are having it on August 24th because the next week is Labor Day weekend. That will be at Northfield High School from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And we will have a couple of community partners there to discuss updates and goings on in the office and city council. Their councilwoman does keep regular office hours. There are virtual office hours where people can sign up and get a one-on-one Zoom call. There's also monthly in-person meetings. This month is in Northfield on September 14th, and that will be at Badass Burritos. You can email the District 8 at denvergov.org email to sign up for that. And you can ask questions of the councilwoman. You can bring solutions to problems that you have noticed. And we track that data and input it, for example, in the upcoming budget season. And then the last note is that the District 8 community panels, there are 3 of them. There is the transportation panel, the safety through environmental design panel. That's sort of in line with some of the work that Dr. Calderon was mentioning earlier on CPTED. And the panel on climate as well. Those will begin again. The last round ended in May, and now we're reconvening to talk about long-term district-wide projects that the members of those panels would like to see. And so those will begin again in September. And with that, that's sort of the general update from District 8.
Great, thank you. I know we are a little short on time, but could you just share in the chat the information on the town halls and also like the office hours that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. I will go ahead and put those in. And I see a question from Helen Lee asking if there is any new emergency housing site proposed for District 8, currently not operating. There is no emergency housing sites proposed for District 8 at the moment. There is the stay in, and I believe there are some discussions going on, but it wouldn't operate as a emergency housing site. It would be I believe a veterans shelter. And then the ballroom at the DoubleTree is used as overflow sheltering. There was an update on that as well that came through City Council. That was just related to the grant of money from the state related to it becoming a navigation center. But that wasn't a change in use for the DoubleTree.
Got it. Thank you very much. We'll move to Diane at the MCA.
Hello. Well, everything that we've got is right here in this little little bullet points. And just if you're concerned about back to school schedules at the pools, go to our website and you can find the information for each pool individually, what their schedule is. And then also we have reservations for the Labor Day, getting ready to open up. So get signed up for that. We also have Kids Try this Sunday, so there will be some road closures, and that information is available on our website as well. And then our quarterly board meeting is tomorrow. It will be at our MCA administrative offices on East Northfield Boulevard or on Zoom. And you can get that information located on our website also. We have our final Moja Blue concert scheduled for Thursday, August 29th at Conservatory Green. It will start at 6:30, and summer is wrapping up, and so will I.
Thank you. That's very short and sweet. Any questions from folks before we move on to the next agenda item? All right. Thanks, Diane.
You bet.
And yeah, if folks have questions, you can go to the MCA80238.com website. And now I'm trying to move my thing and it's not working. Hold on just a second. Okay, so now we have CPUN committee updates. We can run through, Carol, are you able to speak on education?
Yes, as it says on the slide, the Education Committee survey, which has focused on transportation, safety, and volunteering, ends on the 23rd, which is this coming Friday. And I have asked committee members to meet before our regularly scheduled monthly meeting in order to do an assessment. And I put out 3 different dates to the 28th, or no, the 29th, the 30th, or September 2nd, for us to assess the data that we get from the survey. And I'm going to ask Tricia if she wants to add anything to this in just a second. And I want to make sure that we thank Tricia Houston and we thank Brian Weber for all of their work on the survey. But I couldn't help but think, as Lisa Calderon was speaking, that we can tie into this because safety and volunteering are 2 questions or 2 foci on this survey. And I think there are numerous possibilities, and I'm very eager to learn more about the organizations that Lisa spoke about. Tricia, do you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think in general, I think the responses that we got from the survey were good feedback. And we will take those and sort of focus in on some very clear initiatives to focus on for the year.
Right. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I don't see Mandel on the call. All right, so I'll just give the update for that. The next meeting for the committee is actually next Tuesday, the 27th at 6 p.m. over Zoom. This is part 2 of the discussion of just action. And so you don't have to have participated in part 1 to actually be part of the discussion. And in fact, you don't even have to have read the book, because we do a summary of the book section at the beginning of it. Is really just kind of a jumping off point for conversations about talking about land use, zoning, and housing opportunities, and specific ideas that we want to just be thinking about for our community as we have kind of all of these new apartment developments, and as the developments reaching full build out, just seeing where we can apply some of the principles of that book in Central Park. So again, that is next Tuesday, August 27th, 6 to 7 p.m. And then health and safety, I think Jeff Barron is the co-chair for that. He's not on tonight. So David, did you want to just give a quick, or David or Amanda?
Amanda, do you mind doing it? I was gonna say, I
Yeah,
know
I
you've
can.
been more the point person. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we are trying to get something on the calendar for next week for our committee to have 2 conversations. One with a representative that we connected with through the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board, and then another time that we can just check in as a committee. And so when we have specifically that second time nailed down, that'll be posted on the CPUN website. And if anyone is listening and interested in hearing what we can talk about with the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board, I guess contact us, and just depending on space, we can see if it's possible to bring other people in. I read their 2023 report, and there weren't recommendations at the community level for the prevention of domestic violence, and so that's the goal of having a conversation with a representative from that organization to see if there's anything at the community level that could help in terms of prevention. So that's on the immediate horizon. But then, just going back to the roots of this organization, when we started in partnership with Neighborhood Watch, and it's just kind of been a theme of this meeting, get to know your neighbors, and in doing so, you can, recognize things that are off and know when to reach out for help. So thanks for being here, and thanks for engaging, everybody.
No, thank you. Is Amy Campbell on for Safe Streets? Not seeing her on, so we'll move on to sustainability. Mark Maringer.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, I first wanted to ask if there's any community members or other board members who want to join in the sustainability committee for this next year to send me an email either personally or just at sustainability@centralparkunitedneighbors.com. I hadn't received any feedback that anybody else wanted to help lead anything, so I started putting together a plan for the year. Our first event will be the second annual Harvest Festival on September 28th. I'll give you a quick rundown on that because I think it's going to be a really good event. Last year, we did something that was essentially a donate any extra food or from your garden or any non-perishable items as well. We're going to do those same items this year, but we're adding in a couple components. We're going to try to organize a gleaning team where they will go to any volunteered trees and collect fruit from them. All the fruit or all the produce collected by this event will then go to Denver Food Rescue, who will take it to groups that help people who are not able to get food otherwise, or get the produce that we're trying to collect here. And I've definitely seen around the neighborhood a lot of trees and gardens that end up with an overabundance at times. So hopefully we'll have a very successful event. I'm hoping we get into the thousands of pounds of produce this year. Soon, assuming that the budget gets approved and everything at the end of this meeting, then we'll get a volunteer form out for anybody who wants to volunteer, as well as hopefully a flyer within before the end of the month to spread to the community. But there's a range of volunteer roles that I'm definitely going to need help with, and some of the functions of what we'll do will depend a little bit on how many people volunteer for it. We also have events, or I have events planned for something on home energy efficiency and electrification for January. Hopefully a volunteer cleanup of a park or something along those lines for April. And then next July, we'll go back into the gleaning direction and try to get some of those cherry trees and other early season fruits harvested so those don't go to waste quite as much as they have been in the past.
Great, thank you. And then for comms and outreach, I had sent out the doodle poll so that we could find a new meeting time. If you're interested at all in helping us around, it's basically communications, outreach, and there's a subcommittee on fundraising. Just that doodle poll. Okay, thank you. Just please fill that doodle poll out. I would say, by end of day on Friday. If you're a CPUN board member interested in that, and then I'll send out information on what the new meeting time and cadence will be for that committee. But we have a number of things to talk about. Some of them will be in the budget request discussion, but then also we have the annual fall community survey coming up, and that's kind of the committee where we start talking about that, and that Mark does a lot of the legwork on basically all of that. So please join that committee, fill out the doodle poll. Brian, if you can.
Can I add one more note on the
go ahead,
outreach
Mark.
and comms? The CPBA meeting was moved back a week, which means that our welcome bag delivery will be moved back a week. But I'm looking for volunteers again, since we're doing it monthly now, for anybody who wants to deliver welcome bags around the community. I'll send out an email later as well, but I just wanted to make sure for anybody who's on, I'll send an email to the board, I should say. But if anybody wants to help with delivery of the bags, you can send me a message in the chat.
Great, thank you so much. Brian is the CPUN treasurer. If you want to lead this part of the agenda with the treasurer's report.
Yeah, so this is kind of our annual kickoff for budgeting. And so what you see in front of you is our current reserve balance. We're up at just over $11,000. And that's partly because our major fundraiser, the mini golf tournament, and the MCA donations were both later in the year. So we'll keep that in mind as we move forward. And then you see the expenses this year. Our biggest expense this year was the website conversion. And the rest of them are just smaller. We did the art of the powwow, and that was covered by additional donations. So I think we had a very successful year. So if you go to the next page, what we did is there are 2 pages for 24-25 budget asks. There are these recurring fixed annual costs that include the ongoing website costs. You see the website domain, the website hosting, MailChimp, and the TechSoup membership. We have all of those that become recurring costs now, as well as our corporate registration, our liability insurance, our Zoom license, and our Inc. membership. The intention is this year that we are going to list all of these out once approved. As these expenses come up, you'll just see them come as part of the treasurer's report. We won't come back to the board on these asks every month. And so the next page of the budget asks are new ask for recurring, which is the fact that the foundation is no longer providing SurveyMonkey. So we are going to request to get a SurveyMonkey license. And then what we have said is that each of the committees would get $150 for events. And if they used it, the ask is that they come to the board and say, this is the event we're going to use it on. And if, as long as there's no issue, it's not that we're upping the budget, we're just asking for the board to be informed of events and spending that the committees are doing. I was going to get to this page, but that will be part of it. So that was the committee ask. And then we do have one-time budget requests from the comms committee to make some additional changes to the website, sustainability for the Harvest Fest, and then $100 to support the joint RNO meeting in October. So our total spend for 24-25 would be just under $5,000. And so assuming that we got no money this year, that would still keep us above our $5,000 minimum. But basically, if you look at the next one, we do anticipate we would get money from the mini golf. MCA does give us $3,000 annually. Plus, we would have email sponsors. So in basically my statement is that the budget seems reasonable based on what we're anticipated to bring in and where our reserves are. So I'll pause to see if anyone has any questions about the budget, anything. The officer group kind of reviewed most of these and felt comfortable bringing these things forward.
I want to make one point of clarification. You've got community email sponsors and a question mark. We've rolled that into the mini golf fundraiser process for sponsors as one of the benefits they get for becoming a certain level of sponsor. So the mini golf event will raise more than $1,500 again. I can all but guarantee it. And hopefully Matt's not too offended with that $1,500 amount. And B, the email sponsorships will be part of that whole process. So
Okay.
I would put it closer to $3,000.
And Mark, I tried to be conservative with that number. So that was me being conservative with the $1,500. So.
Okay, thanks. I just remembered that we had the community email sponsors and they weren't in the kind of under the anticipated revenue. So that's why I put that there. So thanks for clarifying that, Mark. The final bullet point there, if folks have other fundraising ideas or know of grant opportunities for specific projects that you want to work on, I want to encourage everyone to kind of be looking for that. I think something when we were discussing this, something that Brian mentioned is that a big event for like the Art of the Powwow event we had last November, that was, we basically, I think we had some seed money from the CPUN board, but Mandel and Jamie Hodgkins really just kind of worked very, very hard to make sure that it was fully funded by other sponsors as well. And so I suppose like folks can kind of like think along those lines of, we have a certain amount of like general allotments. There's a certain amount that's in the budget. But if you want to think of like a wider event, we can start brainstorming what other funding opportunities there are within the community or through other organizations. But I just want folks to feel empowered to, to have these initiatives as members of CPUN.
Can I add one last pitch on that note? For those of us who do plan the mini golf fundraiser, if you want a larger budget for your committee, the more we raise from that fundraiser, the better. And the more people we have helping with securing sponsorships and selling tickets, then the more money we'll raise. So just a little early plug for planning out your spring.
And
I just want to add, I know it's up on the slide right there that we do receive donations from the MCA, and at times they sponsor events like when they donated the.
we lost Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda, we lost you. Is she still on the call?
No, I think she accidentally hung up.
Oh, no.
But I think what Amanda was trying to say is that the MCA is more than generous with the support of CPUN. The other thing I would call out, Liz, on the $150 was an amount that we thought was appropriate as, kind of a small event for each of the committees. That does not prohibit committees from coming back with other requests above and beyond this, like Mark did with the Harvest Fest. And what that would just mean is that we would have to get board approval for any additional requests above and beyond the budget. So.
Yeah, thank you. And so do folks have questions, I guess, for both I sent out both the narratives and the spreadsheet with the budget tracker on it. And actually something I'd like to do as you do the treasurer reports, Brian, I like to just kind of look at how the actuals, like when these things start hitting the budget, just making sure that like we're also tracking the actuals on the spreadsheet. But I guess I want to open this. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Liz, this is the first year we've probably had a budget worth tracking in many years. But the typical report would be, here are the budget asks, here's what we've spent, and then any additional things. So yeah, what I had been doing in the past was just giving spending updates, but we will give updates against budget now that we have this.
That's great. And so I just want to open this up to everybody else because we do have to kind of vote. I kind of conceived of it as three chunks. There's the recurring fixed costs that were kind of already already like in on. And then there are these new recurring costs and the one-time budget requests. And so I had been thinking of it as, I don't know if you want to do one approval vote or if folks think we should do it as three separate votes. But I want to open this up for any questions or comments about any of the budget requests that we've just gone over.
And generally, Liz, it's not a vote. Does anyone have any objections?
Oh, well, yeah, sorry. It's the kind of, yes.
My only question is, what is TechSoup?
I can answer that one. It's a website that aggregates requests for donations or discounts for big tech companies or for tech companies in general for nonprofits. So we pay for the TechSoup thing because it saves us even far more money than that on our Zoom subscription and sometimes other stuff.
Awesome.
There are a range of other services we could get there. And while I'm on the microphone, let me just say my apologies to the MCA for not highlighting the fact that they have agreed to host us for the Harvest Festival at Conservatory Green. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I apologize for not acknowledging that earlier, but we definitely appreciate your support.
No worries. Happy to help.
Yeah, I'll second that. That was the smoothest reservation process I've ever been a part of. We had the permit within 24 hours. So thank you. I guess any other questions or
if you go to the very last slide, I do just want to say that we put this policy out there. We don't want the committees to feel as though the board has to approve everything, but we do, as part of the approval of the budget, we are asking that anytime the CPUN name or a CPUN committee is gonna do an event, that they do present it to the board for visibility, and then board members should feel comfortable that that is their time to kind of weigh in on those. Historically, we've never really held, we've never held to, you can't do anything. But what we want to make sure is that there's board visibility to the events that are using the CPUN name in advance.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I
And
Can
have
I
no
add
objections.
can I add one note though about the proposed policy? We are a 501c3, so there are restrictions on what we can spend money on. So for example, if you in your committee really like the candidate for office, you cannot give them money. We as an organization cannot do that. So we should probably figure out a way to get a list of the things that 501c3s can and cannot do legally.
I'll have that for the next board meeting, Mark.
that's great. Thank
But I
you.
would like to say that I think that I appreciate the policy. I think it's a reasonable request, and I think having an annual budget will be helpful for all the committee.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing other raised hands unless I'm missing something. So I guess can we move on to, does anybody have any objections to any of these budget asks? Okay. Silence. Brian, what do we need to, I guess, can we
We're
just,
done.
like, we're done, it's
done.
approved? All
It's
right,
done.
so our 2024-2025 budget asks are approved, and that actually leaves us with a good amount of time to just kind of go over a look ahead and wrap up for our meeting. If folks are okay with that, our next meeting will be September 17th. And kind of it'll be, we had to switch. I had wanted to do that for our August meeting. We had to switch because Lieutenant Hines had let me know he wouldn't be available in September to kind of talk about the safety topics. So we've moved the board development and strategic planning to September 17th. And so my major question just for everybody on the board, or just to please send me your answer to this question. What outcomes would you like to come out of this kind of board meeting? What sort of, I guess, like what would you consider to be a successful outcome of the September meeting? And that will help us shape the agenda for it. If you can send me that by, end of day on Sunday or, whenever the deadline is for our community email, I can bring that together. And I also would like some, if there are any other board members, and I'm thinking specifically Kristen Fry, because I know you have experience with facilitating these sorts of meetings. Just I'd like to get together with at least a few people to talk about the best way to kind of build an effective agenda for us for that meeting.
Yep, absolutely. Count me in. Love to be
Okay.
part of that. I think we need to know kind of what the group's objectives are first, and because that might help us understand.
Yeah.
So
So
do
I
we need more
wanted to make sure
brainstorming or activities or that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very important. Please send me the information on what you would like, kind of what your goal for that meeting would be, and then we'll get together. Anybody else who's interested in helping planning that agenda, email me, and I'll kind of get a group email thread started. The October 15th meeting is a joint RNO meeting, and so just to refresh folks' memories, we meet on the third Tuesday of every month. There are two other kind of neighbor RNOs that also meet on the third Tuesday of the month, East Colfax Neighborhood Association and the Northeast Park Hill Coalition. And so I reached out to the heads of those boards, and they were very interested in meeting up. We've had two kind of preliminary meetings, and it will be actually held. We were looking for a place that is easily accessible for people coming from our three neighborhoods. So this is ideally, there will be a virtual option, but ideally it will be in person. Lamone Knowles with the Northeast Park Hill group, they're working on securing a space on 29th Avenue at Quebec. So it's I think possibly the foundation's offices are where they're hoping to secure that space. So they're working on that. So that location is to be announced. But the idea is to meet from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m. With 6 to 6:30 being a little social time where we'll have some food and folks can, meet up with each other. There will be a couple of activities of just to like have some icebreakers. And then 6:30 to 8 o'clock is the goals of the meeting are largely just so that we can get to know each other's neighborhoods, get to know people in the neighborhoods, and understand where people's hopes and concerns and challenges for their communities lie and how we can collaborate. So that's another meeting where the agenda is not fully set. And so if there's anybody who's interested in helping out with that, please email me and we can and you can get kind of included in those conversations, but we'll kind of need a few more hands for that. And then the last meeting of the year is a combined November-December meeting. Because of the holidays, so it's, the date and topic are to be determined. If we want to talk about the date now, we can. I can turn off my screen sharing so we can just talk. Hi, folks. So I guess I'll pull up the calendar if folks are okay with just kind of determining when we'll have that November-December meeting so we can get it set up.
All right, I'm pulling up mine.
Yeah. Let's see.
The calendar actually looks like it works out okay to potentially use our normal November meeting spot if we wanted to.
21st. Okay, and then just skip. I guess for the folks who are on this call, do you have?
No, that'd be the 19th.
Oh, sorry, the 19th.
19th.
Yeah. Do you have any conflicts on November 19th?
Should work for me.
Works
I'll be
for
out
me.
of town. I can do it by Zoom.
Okay. That'll be fine. Okay, well, that was easier than I thought it would be. If folks are okay with the 19th, we will have the cube that night, so it makes it a whole lot easier to just hold it that night. So we can do that, and then we won't meet in December. And I guess if folks, we actually don't have a topic set, that can be something that, usually these, we kind of plan these out just a couple of months in advance. And I feel like I've liked how the topics we've had or guest speakers we've had over the past year have kind of risen organically. It seems from, some kind of hot topics or issues that we're seeing in the community. And so if there's anything that folks feel strongly about now that we could consider for November, you can, or that's something that we can just kind of think about and then revisit in the September meeting.
I actually have a suggestion for it, which is that's a perfect time to reach out to our state legislators. And rather than just hear what they decided to work on our behalf, give them an idea of what we want them to work on our behalf in the legislative session. Because it's right before the period where they have to submit their bills for the year, which is like early December or something. So it would be a great way to like build a little more connection with our state legislators at a time when they're not all burned out from the end of legislative session and not like, but starting to tune into it.
Okay, and I guess, wait, so if you can just, how would you like to format that? I guess like, so it would be a Q&A for us to kind of bring issues that we would like them to address, or how?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can give them a few minutes to, highlight what their priorities have been,
Yeah.
but then try to set aside, like today we had close to an hour of guest speaker, and I actually really liked that because I feel like we didn't have a ton of time for questions, but we had enough time, I feel like, to cover most of what wanted to be covered. And I would say if we did the same with our, there's 2 state reps and I think only 1 state senator, we can have them, give 5-10 minutes each of here's what I'm, considering working on, but also, issues for people from the community to raise and have a chance to actually talk with their legislators.
I think
there's
that would bring a lot of
also-
people to the meeting.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that there's also that we also do have the Aurora folks, so I would just want to include. I mean,
Yes.
very
Yes.
small part of the community, but I don't want to leave out our Adams County residents.
Excellent point.
So, and I see Helen. I read there's a school district bond. Does anyone know if any of the proposed new schools are in Central Park or District 8? And I believe the answer to that is no. So I think we had gotten a communication from Director Quattlebaum when we had asked about the North End piece of land that's owned by DPS, and there's no plans for that to become a school. But that's a good question. So okay, I have the state ledge Q&A and conversation for our November meeting. Something that I do also, it would probably be more for first quarter of 2025. I really think it's before we get our property tax bills, I think having a Metro District 101 explainer, I would like to have that as one of our meetings because I feel like it is the special taxing district is something that is unique to the sort of development that we are in Central Park. And so I know that Matt Blackburn and Jack Seward are both on the boards for the Metro District. So I will kind of be touching base with both of you to see what we can do in early 2025 to just have a Metro Districts 101. But other than that, wide open for suggestions from folks on other topics over the next few months.
That sounds good on the Metro District presentation, Liz. We're working on putting together a slide deck, so we'll have some information to deliver and that the timing works out. So we'll be ready in early 25.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have 1 minute left. I just want to mention one thing since folks in the chat are asking about the DPS bond. The INC is actually going to have an event talking about all of the ballot initiatives. It'll be, I think it's an informational event there's going to be a lot of initiatives, a lot of items on our ballot in November. We don't have the capacity as an organization to have that, to do explainers on that, but the INC is, and I'll be including information for that event. That's a voter education event, just about, kind of the long list of things that we'll be confused about at the, end of our November ballot. All right, 8:30, I can let everybody go. I guess we'll see you online and September 17th.
Good job, Liz. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.
Thank you.